Good morning, Husker fans. Welcome back to the Husker Big Red podcast. I'm Chris Peterson, and joining me as always is Danny Gillette. We're back here on this Thursday for another episode, and we got quite a few things to talk about. Some five-star buzz for the Huskers. Michael Terry coming in for another visit, so we'll talk about that, what that means. We're going to go over a little fall camp stock report, whose stock is on the rise for the Huskers here with barely over 2 weeks left before the season. And then we're going to talk about the closed scrimmages. That's kind of a hot topic of conversation. Matt Rule closing up practices and scrimmages. So we're going to talk about that and lots of other stuff as well to do with the Cornhuskers. Before we get into all that, please make sure that you guys hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. It really helps us out, helps other Nebraska fans find our content. Make sure you check out Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all that stuff as well for the audio version. And Danny, how you doing on this Thursday morning, man?
Pretty good. We're getting closer to the season, like you said, and there's been a lot of buzz both in recruiting and inside the program to get to, so I can't wait for it today.
Yeah, so let's get with it, man. The latest reporting with Michael Terry, the five-star athlete, 6'3", 217 out of San Antonio, Texas, ranked 32nd overall in the 2025 class. Multiple reports from on Husker Online, 24/7 Sports, that Michael Terry is going to take a third visit to Nebraska. They haven't set the date yet, but sounds like it's going to be for that Colorado game. That makes sense. They've got, Michael Clayton, the four-star quarterback, visiting for that. Some other recruits are coming in for that game, and just makes sense.
From Oklahoma, who's also really good.
I'm
going to look it up in a second while you talk.
But a blue chip running back. I think in the 2026 class. I want to say
he is a 2026 guy.
So, yeah, I think that would be, like the perfect scenario to get Michael Terry on campus. Hasn't been there for a game yet. And if there's a game on the schedule in Lincoln you want to have a recruit go to this year, I would say it's the Colorado game. It's going to be prime time. Lincoln Memorial Stadium is going to be frothing at the mouth. I mean, it might be as loud for this game as it's ever been.
Caden Jones is the running back who's going to visit for the Colorado game, 2026 back. Has offers from Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Oregon, and Miami. And so he's a very talented running back. And so I'll let you continue. Sorry, Chris. I like to go on my own tangents here, but a lot of talent coming in for that Colorado game, I think. It's going to be a big recruiting one and a big game on the field as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who else kind of lines up visits for that weekend. But in terms of Michael Terry, he was going to decide in August. He always just said soon. He didn't have a specific date like David Sanders is deciding the 17th. He always just said he wanted to decide kind of before the season. Now he's taking his recruitment into the season. According to Mike Roach of 24/7 Sports, who's like he used to work on just the Texas beat, but now he's just kind of more of a recruiting reporter. But I would say he's one of the top reporters on recruiting in Texas. And so he reported on Tuesday of this visit, and also that Texas A&M is essentially out of this recruitment. So now it's Nebraska, Oregon, and Texas. And I would argue that it's Nebraska and Texas. I don't think that Oregon's really that involved here that much. And I know Texas has landed some other big-time receivers, but just like with David Sanders, I think Nebraska's in the top two. What's your read on the Michael Terry situation?
I feel like Nebraska sits in a very good spot for Michael Terry because Michael Terry honestly made a whole video back in May kind of showcasing Nebraska. Now, he didn't make it, like a production team made it, but he's spoken highly of Nebraska before. And, this isn't just sudden interest in Nebraska. Like, I feel David Sanders is maybe a little bit more, not sudden, but, coming onto the scene late. I feel like, Michael Terry's been interested in Nebraska for quite a while. I feel like Sanders did us a favor by taking a visit, whereas Terry, I feel like there's legitimate interest there.
I do think that there's some legitimate interest with David Sanders. Like, I do think he really has a strong tie especially with Dylan Raiola. I think that's the thing that's kind of get him in. And then I do think he's impressed by the fan base, but I think that maybe distance is a little bit of a factor. I'm not a huge factor, but Tennessee's quite a bit closer to North Carolina than Nebraska. And also that's a huge shift in culture, to go from the South to go, to Lincoln, Nebraska. I mean, we were talking about that from, kids from, coming from California or Florida, really anywhere to Lincoln, Nebraska it can be a big change.
Texas.
So yeah. So sometimes, I don't know, maybe that factors into it, but it does look like David Sanders is going to choose Tennessee this week. But I do think it was still impressive for the Huskers to, work their way into that mix. I mean, they surpassed a lot of teams in that race: Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, just to name a few. So, once that winning starts to happen more, I think that they're going to have a chance. Not that Tennessee's won that much, but they have been in the top 25 consistently the past 2 seasons.
Yeah, it's about what have you done for me lately, and Tennessee has more of a winning culture right now than Nebraska, and I think Michael Terry also, there's the Texas ties that the coaching staff has in general, and I think that helps as well. So I feel a little bit better about Michael Terry than I obviously do David Sanders, but we'll have to see how it plays out. I mean, he's kind of kept things close to the vest, and like Sanders, at least Nebraska is in the running with this recruitment, and like I just said now, probably a little bit better chance than Sanders.
Yeah, and say if they, Sanders comes Terry comes for that Colorado game, and Dylan Raiola and the Nebraska offense light up Colorado, and the offense looks great, and they score like 40 points, and they beat the Buffs. And I'm not saying it's going to be an easy win. I don't think that at all, but
No.
I do think that this offense could light it up, and I think that could entice someone like Michael Terry to be like, hey, I want to be part of this, and I think he could have a really big role in this offense as a Deebo Samuel type. Because, I mean, you look at his high school stats last year, he rushed for 996 yards, and he had like 600 yards receiving, 10 total touchdowns, a pick 6. Like, this guy can do it all.
I just hope that a CBS reporter somehow sneaks onto the field pregame and interviews Deion Sanders and then completely rattles the Buffaloes, and that's that. That's what I hope. That's my key to the game right there.
He sees the CBS logo and just gets shook. That's hilarious. That is funny. But yeah, that was crazy. That press conference was like something I've never, I mean, I understand coaches like Coach K, or not that he ever was like that, but just when you have like the stature, when you want to like you earn like kind of the right to be an asshole a little bit, but like Deion's like what
Bill Belichick.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what have you won 2 like conference championships in the FCS, buddy? Like, come on.
And take off your glasses if you're talking about being a man inside.
Yeah. Although Bruce Feldman said he thinks that Colorado could win 8 games this year, which I thought that was a little surprising. I don't know. Maybe.
I mean, I don't know about that defensive line, but I think their offensive line will be a little bit better.
I mean, they are in the Big 12. If we were in the Big 12, we'd win 11 games this year, probably.
We should have never came to the Big 10.
Should have never. Well, I don't know, but now that it's like the Big 2, I guess it's not bad to be in the Big 10.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
I do miss the days of the Big 12, though. That transition was more difficult than the recruiting got messed up, and then the style of play it took a long transition. But I think Matt Rule's got us in a good spot. Last year we looked like a Big 10 team, just minus the quarterback.
Yeah, well, that ended up being a big minus, honestly. But we got it fixed. Hopefully. So,
yeah, hopefully. So let's go to our fall camp stock report. Not that we talked about this before. There's not a ton of guys that like their stock is going to be falling because coaches aren't really going to put talk down about guys. So we're focusing more on who's kind of improving their stock, who's been rising their stock in recent weeks. And one guy that comes to mind right away, I'll start James Williams, met with the press this week on Tuesday. And man, just an impressive athlete. And what's impressive to me is like every, guy who's talked about him is talking about how much he's improved. And you see that with Keanu Davis too, and James Williams was talking about him, but man, after 2 sacks in 4 games last year, I really feel like that James Williams is going to have a breakout season, and hell, he could lead the Huskers in sacks this season. I mean, Jamari Butler had 5.5 last year. I think James Williams definitely is going to get 5, and I think he could push for 7.
I agree, and I think it's a blessing to have this much depth on the defensive line, because once Polar Bear and Ty Robinson leave, and then you have James Williams, Keanu Davis, you're set at the position. And, Williams, we talked about him last year as someone who was kind of not an afterthought when he signed with the program, but, we just didn't really pay too much attention. And then he burst onto the scene and played pretty well. So, I think Williams is going to be important. I just keep looking at that wide receiver room, and, Garrett McGuire's talked about Carter Nelson and how he just wants to compete. He has that competitive mentality, and he wants to, get better. And then you look at, Malachi Coleman, and, McGuire talked about him as well. And McGuire's expecting big things from Coleman. And, just to me, the big thing for that wide receiver room is going to be health, because we mentioned Lloyd having that hamstring injury earlier this month. And then Coleman's had his share of injuries, and that's not to talk down on him. It's just if these guys can stay healthy, watch out.
Yeah, and Isaiah Nayor has had some injury,
Yeah.
history as well, and he hopefully is going to be a dynamic threat for Nebraska this year. But yeah, Carter Nelson, the stock is definitely on the rise, and with the Garrett McGuire comments, he also talked about his blocking and how his blocking was dominant. He compared him to Duranian Bonner, who's moved from fullback back out to wide receiver, and like he's a guy that I think Bonner gets overlooked a lot because like he's going to play this year quite a bit at receiver, and that blocking is one reason why, because I think you're going to see more of those screen type passes, because when you have a really accurate quarterback and when you have athletes, like it makes sense to run more of those quick screens to get Ja'Cory Barney the football, Jalen Lloyd the football in space, and then when you've got guys like Carter Nelson and Bonner blocking for him, that can lead to some good things. And the other part of that too, is the running game. If you look at teams that run the football well, that get those explosive runs, it's because they have wide receivers who are able and willing to block. And I think Nebraska is going to have in terms of those blocking wide receivers with Nelson, Coleman, Bonner, I think they're going to have a lot of success. Jamal Banks, they have a lot of big guys out there, and I think that's going to lead to hopefully some explosive runs on the perimeter that maybe people aren't taking into account with those big wide receivers on the outside.
And it's also about having a passing game that's a threat, because once defense commits to the pass, you can run a little bit more as well. So you can kind of have a little bit more of a balance instead of teams stacking the box like they quite frankly did last year. So having those explosive athletes will definitely help the run game as well, because then that will confuse the defense and make it harder to game plan.
Yeah, for sure. And like on the defensive side of the ball, one guy who the stock has been rising is Amari Sanders, a freshman. Vincent Shavers is another guy. We've been talking about him a lot. I don't think that's his stock has been on the rise since he got to Lincoln. But Amari Sanders, I definitely keep hearing more about him. I keep reading more about him, and he's working his way, I think, into that conversation. To be that number 2 cornerback. Jeremiah Charles is banged up right now, so there's a lot of guys in that mix. Marcus Buford, Zaire Wright, Sanders now, Larry Tarver, but it really feels
Sean
like
Singleton, not a corner, but has also gotten praise from Tony White this camp.
And I think with Singleton, I think his kind of getting back to form, I guess I should say, after he played really well last year before he was injured. So with Singleton, Hartzog, and Isaac Gifford, you can feel pretty good about that safety room, and that allows a guy like Marcus Buford to bump down and play some cornerback. That those other 3 spots are kind of solidified.
And quite honestly, John Bullock too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, Bullock did a nice job filling in last year when Singleton and others went down. So he's not the best athlete in the world, but he did a very solid job.
And really, I mean, the thing I like about this team and this defense, the defensive line, and I think with Tony White, one comment that kind of struck me from him is he said, the defensive line, like they've made a huge jump from last year. Like that's where he's seen some of the most improvement. And I mean, our defensive line was pretty darn good last year. Yeah. So, I mean, if they've taken a big, so I guess to me that says, okay, you've got your front players, Butler, Nash, and Robinson, they're studs. But what that tells me is those other guys like Prince Mamalian, Cameron Leonard, Kai Wallen, James Williams, Keanu Davis, those guys are taking the next step. And when you have that kind of depth to go like 10 deep, which is something that James Williams mentioned, even going 12 or 13 deep, that's when you really have a dominant defensive line. If you can keep Nash, Hutchmaker, like fresh, you don't have to play him a ton of snaps, like that dude will absolutely dominate up front.
Riley Van Poppel is another name that comes to mind. Another name, not on the defensive line, but just overall that I saw is Dylan Rogers. I kind of honestly forgot about him because there was just so many defense players on the roster. That's not a shot at Rogers, but, he's a guy that could maybe make an impact this year as well. So there's just a ton of depth on defense, and it's good to see because there's been years when it's been pretty lean.
Yeah, Dylan Rogers, he was the guy I've been, really high on coming out of high school as a recruit. So, heard good things about him in that linebacker room. But yeah, there is, I mean, at all 3 levels, I feel like you have really solid depth, and I feel good about the depth pretty much the only spot I'm worried about the depth right now is offensive tackle. And unfortunately that's just, I don't think Nebraska's alone in that. There's a lot of teams that have depth issues at offensive. There's a reason why, when you go into the portal and like a mid, an average offensive tackle gets in there and teams are recruiting him like he's a 5-star, because those guys just, really good offensive tackles don't grow on trees, unfortunately.
No, and we've seen before how not having a solid offensive tackle can really affect the offense. So, I mean, I like where Nebraska stands in terms of depth on the line this year. I thought they did a good job addressing it, and yeah, I'm just excited to see kind of where not only where the defense falls, but how the offense runs as well.
Yeah, and it'll be Turner Corcoran's going to play a huge role this year. Hopefully, he can make it through 12 games. I think if he does that, I think he'll be fine. It's just if he gets hurt, then there's going to be, Gunnar Gatula or maybe a Grant Bricks or, somebody along those lines will get an
Which
opportunity.
honestly doesn't scare me as much as previous years, because I want to see Bricks play. I want to see Gatula play. So I mean, this is why they're so highly ranked and why you brought them here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good to have those options at least. And there's other guys too, Tyler Knack and Jacob Hood that have a little more college experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was pretty telling that when Matt Rule talked about like the next man up, he didn't mention either of their names. So I mean, take that for what it is. But I thought that was significant. But I do think that Gunnar Gatula, he's not going to maybe look like a future first round pick out there, but he'll get between the defender and the quarterback. And at the end of the day, that's what you need. And if there's only one position really that you have to, provide help to in terms of like a chip with a fullback or a tight end, that makes it a little easier than if you're trying to cover, 3, 4, 5 spots, which was basically what Nebraska was trying to do a couple of years ago when Casey Thompson was the sacrificial lamb back there.
He really was a sacrificial lamb back there. I just remember watching some of these games, and I'm like, how can he make it through the season? And people used to crap on Casey Thompson all the time, and he did make some tough decisions, but he was probably honestly afraid of getting hit, and I don't blame him.
Yeah, he was a big time quarterback when he played though, and if he wouldn't have got hurt that season, I do think that they would have won enough. They would have got to a bowl game. I really believe that.
No, I do too, because you look at the connection he built with just Trey Palmer alone, and those two could have carried Nebraska to a bowl game, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and they had like a couple of close losses, and he wasn't like the Minnesota game, the Illinois game that he wasn't able to play. And so I think that could have made a difference. But
Trey Palmer, I miss Trey Palmer. I wish we had. I wish he was still here.
The Tampa Bay Huskers, baby, with
Yeah, and he's
Levante David, and yeah, he's awesome. He's pretty good.
He's doing pretty well. So yeah.
Yeah, it's good to see. It's been good to see Levante David getting some more pub.
Cam
Although
Jurgens, I'm seeing on social media too, and honestly, I crapped on him the whole time he was here, but he proved me wrong.
Yeah, he's going to have a good season, and I mean, Adrian Martinez trying to earn a backup job with the Jets, behind the ever mercurial Aaron Rodgers. So we'll see how that works out.
We'll see. I mean, because after Aaron Rodgers is Jordan Travis, right? And Travis,
yeah, and he's coming off ACL or something.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I just feel like Adrian Martinez has a lot of untapped potential. He should at least be on somebody's practice squad.
Honestly, the Vikings could use him right now. After JJ, it's Sam Darnold and I forget the other guy. Nick Mullins. And so it's like, yeah, okay.
Nick Mullins. Oh man, yeah, that was tough news for JJ McCarthy too, because he looked so good in the.
He did, and I will say he did look good.
I mean, it's just one preseason game though, but
and then Jordan Addison went down too, so he would have lost.
Oh, did he?
Well, he went down in practice. I'm not sure if he's out for the season, but the Vikings are becoming the walking wounded.
Yeah, and I obviously hate the Vikings more than any other franchise, but I hate injuries. I never want guys to get hurt. So, especially JJ McCarthy, but yeah, that sucks about Jordan Addison too. I wish there was a way we could just turn off injuries in real life. That'd be sweet.
Yeah, I mean, that would have definitely helped Nebraska over the past couple of years.
That happens. That's like on my teams too. These guys getting hurt all the time when I play on video games. Like what's up with that? I can't deal with it. I need those guys
wear
out
and tear system in NCAA. That's really messing me up right now.
Yeah, really pissing me off. It cost me Isaiah. It cost me a Rutgers game, man, because Isaiah Nair couldn't play hardly, and it's crap.
You put him out there anyway.
Of course I did, yeah. But he wasn't the same. And then my entire running back room, literally Dowdell, all four of them were severely. So I had to play with that Beckwith guy. That's I don't know. That must be Gabe Urban. I guess they tried to, even though he doesn't look like Gabe Urban.
No,
but I'm like, okay.
I don't think his rights were in the game, and honestly, that whole scenario sounds like real life for Nebraska. So
yeah,
entire running back from hurt by week 2.
And then, man, I blew it against Rutgers. So I like had twice where the roughing the punter crap like totally screwed me. So I had them, I had them stopped, and it was like 4th and 12, like they were in my territory, roughed the punter until they got a field goal to go up by 8. And so then I got back within 2 and got a 3-and-out, and they were like punting at their own 10, like 4th and 20 or something, because I got a sack. And both times it was Kobe Bretts, you bastard, Kobe Bretts, and just ran right in there and drilled him. So then they went down and got a touchdown, and then I
The
threw an
roughing
interception.
penalties are crazy because you don't even try to do them, and then like the computer just runs into the kicker.
What I've started doing is like that guy on the edge. I started running him the other way, because if you don't do anything with him, he just like runs right. And I'm like, why are you doing this to me?
It's like trying not to field a bad punt. Just call poison and run off the field.
Yeah. So that's how Rutgers upset me in Lincoln this year. I'm disappointed in myself.
I hope that's not real life.
Hopefully Kobe Bretts doesn't rough the punter twice. Oh man. Last thing I wanted to get to today, since it's been a hot topic of conversation, the closed scrimmage, it kind of made a big headline, I guess, last week, because the only guy that did get kicked out of the scrimmage was Tom Osborne. And Matt Rule was like, well, everybody was too afraid to tell him to leave, so he got to stay. But
you post one picture of Tom Osborne, and the entire fan base goes either completely like happy or like up in arms. It's like,
yeah,
why?
I love when Dr. Tom's there, but that's just me.
I do too. I mean, I could see where fans would be mad, but I remember like a couple comments on my post were like, "Oh, he's still breathing." I'm like, yeah, he's still breathing. Yeah, he is."
You'll know if something happens to Dr. Tom. Like
the flags will be at half mast.
The state will be mourning for a long time. Yeah, it'll be a sad day. But I do think it's interesting, like the parents, high school coaches, former players, everybody's kind of cut off. I don't know, I feel like people are reading way too much into this and like making it out like Nebraska's like not ready for the season. And that, I get there was the whole thing in the Big Red preview, and he had that speech like, you're not playing up to prime time or whatever, that's kind of paraphrasing. But do you think this is something to worry about, or is this just overblown?
No, because Scott Frost never had open practices, did he?
I don't think so. I mean, not that I think he had some, but I don't really remember, to be honest.
Honestly, then we would probably see him not being at the practices at all and having the coaches run the show if we saw what really happened at Scott Frost open practice. But
he had to stop at runs on the way. But I mean, Michigan never has. Michigan doesn't let a soul into practice.
Too, and in all seriousness, too, like there were so many overreaction videos to the Big Red preview that the stuff started to leak out, and Matt Rule probably didn't like it at all. I mean, honestly, like we take one thing and completely make it into something crazy. So I don't blame him for closing practices at all. Let them install the offense. Let them have it away from media and fans. Let them just practice football, play football. I mean, open practices weren't really a thing, like I said, in the Frost era. I mean, I remember when we used to be begging for any sort of media coverage, and quite honestly, Matt Rule's given us a lot more than we're used to.
Yeah, I think Matt Rule gives as much media access as like any big time program in the country. Like if you look at like Michigan's compared to Nebraska's is like 0. I mean, they'll meet with the media like once a month or something. Like the Nebraska trots out players every other day. Michigan does not do that. I mean, they will, really? Yeah, they'll have some availabilities, but not nearly as much. And they don't let, they have any, there's no portion of their practices that are open to the media ever. Where Nebraska, I mean, Rule's already had 2 open media sessions, and that's not even counting the Big Red preview. So technically 3. So he gives a lot of access that a lot of other programs don't, and I'm happy for that. But I'm not worried about this at all. Let's just batten down the hatches, get everybody focused up, and let's get ready for August 31st, man. I know everybody's focused on Colorado, but got to beat UTEP first. We got to get 1-0. That's what this entire offseason is about, getting to 1-0.
Yeah, and also, developing the players over the course of the year as well. And so, no, I don't think closed practices are a cause for concern. I really don't. I'm just excited to see what it's going to look like on August 31st, and I'm curious to see how Marcus Satterfield will do this year, just in terms of adapting and running the offense that he wants to run with now athletes that he can run his offense with.
And last note today to wrap up the show, a little baseball. Will Bolt with a 5-year extension, excuse me. So it's going to be going through the 2029 season.
Mhm.
So now he's got 5 years left on his contract,
Mm.
which makes sense. You know, they had a 40-win season, won the Big Ten tournament, made the NCAA tournament, and were able to win a game there before they got bounced. But I just think, you know, really, if you look at, you know, and some of this was done by Trev Alberts, but Troy Dannon's done a lot of it since he got here. But, you know, Fred Hoiberg locked up, Amy Williams locked up, Will Bolt locked up, Matt Rule. I mean, he's still in a very long-term contract. And, you know, within a couple of years, I mean, if he starts winning games, I'm sure he'll be in line for an extension. So I like the fact that Nebraska is, you know, has a lot of what I would call elite coaches, and they've done well to retain them.
Absolutely. And he has 137 wins in 5 seasons. That's good for 6 all time. And he's put out 9 draft picks for the Nebraska baseball program. I mean, Josh Caron was just taken by the Seattle Mariners in the 4th round, and Brett Sears in the 7th round by the Braves. And, you know, when you look at, you know, what he was able to do this year, we had a little bit of a lull, and then they really caught fire in the Big Ten tournament. And then obviously Stillwater didn't go the way that we intended, but I mean, they played Florida, and Florida is one of the best programs in the country. And, you know, just being able to win the Big Ten tournament for the first time in program history, you know, with All-American honors as well throughout his tenure with the program. I mean, Will Bolt has it on an upward trajectory, and it's good to lock him in.
Yeah, it's good to lock him in. Just keeping that momentum going, and I think it's going to be very interesting when Nebraska can, you know, offer 32 baseball scholarships. I'm interested to see if they do that. I'm inclined to say that they will. That they want to be, you know, they want this baseball program to be among the best. And if you want to compete with the SEC, you're going to have 32 scholarships, because I guarantee you, Florida, Texas A&M, all those schools are going to have 32 scholarships for baseball. So hopefully Nebraska will, and we can start really competing with the big boys. But it's good to see, you know, that talent. When you see that talent have success, it's good to see, you know, that talent being retained. So good on you, Troy Dannon, and another, you know, nice move for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. So I guess we'll wrap it up there, you guys. Like I said at the beginning, please like and subscribe, hit the comments section, and as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.